All right, Matthew 28:18. Let's read this. Matthew 28. Caesar.
And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit.
All right. So question number one, I'd ask this with other verses. What does authority in religion reside, or where does authority in religion reside? And what impact does this have on our beliefs and practices? Of course, here he states very simply that all authority is in him in heaven and on earth. So thinking about Jesus having that authority, any other things to add about where authority in religion resides, how, maybe another aspect of that, of it residing in him? What are other ways the New Testament describes Christ? Relative to the body, Tom?
The Word.
The Word. Yes, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. So that Word embodied from God. Anything else?
He is the head of the body. Ephesians 1:22, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He's the high priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, Hebrews 7, something. But then he's also King of Kings, which maybe even from the Old Testament reference. I don't know if he's called king. Well, he's King of the Jews in the Gospels. So king, head, high priest.
All right, let's take a quick peek at that. 1 Timothy 6. 1 Timothy 6, and really verses 14 and 15 to grab that context there. So 1 Timothy 6, 14 and 15, who's got that for us? Go ahead, Hank.
That you keep this commandment without spot, blameless, and for our Lord Jesus Christ appearing, which he will manifest in his own time. He who is the blessed and only prominent King of kings and Lord of lords.
Okay, so there is that description that Zach brought up, King of Kings and then Lord of Lords. What does it mean, King of Kings?
Ruler of all.
Ruler of all?
Complete sovereignty over all.
Okay, so it has in there that blessed and only potentate. The potentate, of course, is a sovereign ruler, a single one in whom all authority resides, all power resides in that potentate. And so he's being described as that here, King of Kings, King above all other kings, the supreme King, if you will, the Lord of all lords, the one who's above all.
I'm not sure how it is read, but one says he is blessed and only sovereign. So
Yeah.
the only one.
Yes. So that idea of potentate is the idea of the sovereign. Today, even in political realms, sometimes they'll refer to the sovereign. And what they're saying is the king or the queen who's sitting upon the throne, the idea somebody who's the head of state. Well, here the Bible's describing Jesus as the blessed and only potentate. He's in a category by himself. And that's part of what the priesthood of Melchizedek goes to. There is no other. There's no one before him. There's no one who succeeds after him. He is the one and only. He is unique in all these things. And so he's unique in this position in the kingdom of God that he is the ruler. And all power, authority resides in him. Ron?
Yeah, and also about the thought that he is the great I am, that he has always existed. He's the Alpha, he's the Omega. There is no beginning, there is no end.
Exactly right. Nancy.
Well, in Jude 25, it refers to him with glory and majesty, dominion, and power, both now and forever.
Right.
Which is another way of saying what Ron just said.
Yes. So these descriptions being piled one on top of the other, it's conveying to us the idea you cannot over-describe his glory, his power, his majesty, his rule, his reign, his position, his superiority to all others that are there. Caesar, did you have something?
No, it was just knowing nobody about him, the one and only.
Exactly. Other thoughts there. So you have the one in whom all authority resides. And so the second part of that is, what impact does that have on our beliefs and practices?
Well, in the world today, you look to our leadership, the president, the CEO, or something like that, as to, if you have the information, I want to hear it, I want to follow you, I want to obey you. No different, how it applies to us spiritually. He is the one, and that's who we look to.
Okay, yes, exactly right. There's the authority there we have to look to. Hank?
If he's the only one, he should be the only one that would follow, for example, other denominations use man's word. It's not in the Bible anymore, but they follow that doctrine. His is the only doctrine we should be applying our lives to.
Yes, denominations, those who are out there, they've created their own system of beliefs and practices and everything else, and that is nowhere to be seen within those who would be New Testament Christians. Carrie?
Well, I just think of absolute truth. There's always, people wanting to explain things, but going back to his word, that's absolute truth.
Okay. So what does that mean for us a little more specific? Tom started us down that road. Let me ask you this. How do we know about his authority and the things expressed by his authority? How do we understand his will?
Since we as Christians, we are followers of him. He abides everything in him, and our life, our spiritual life, is for him and obedience to him. And nobody, he's completely dedicated to his authority, to his will. Right now, please him.
Yes, we have to have that wholehearted dedication to him, and he is the supreme master of our lives. Let's go to Matthew chapter 10. Matthew 10 and verse 40. Matthew 10, verse 40. Who'll read that for us? Go ahead, Carter.
He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me.
Okay, so thinking about sovereignty of Christ, how does this tie into that, and what does it mean?
As we started with Matthew chapter 28, we're supposed to go out and teach the gospel. We're supposed to go out and teach those about Christ, his sovereignty, who he is. And as they receive the message that's being given to them, they are receiving him. And they are also receiving the Father as an equal of Christ as well.
Yes, if you receive Christ, you receive the Father. Other thoughts there? Who's he talking to there in Matthew 10:40? Go back to verse 1.
The apostles.
The apostles. So 10 verse 40, very specific. How does that apply?
We have fellowship with God,
We have fellowship with God. We have fellowship with one another. 1 John chapter 1 refers to that idea. Truly our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ.
Well, whatever we teach needs to be what the apostles taught.
Okay?
We talked about this, I think, last study, but it's not just the words Jesus spoke. It's the delegated authority he gave to the apostles and the gospel accounts, the words of others, the epistles. The entire New Testament is authorized, but it's not all directly words of Jesus. So we're responsible for following the whole counsel of God. And then even today, in the local congregation, there's established authority through the elders. And as long as what they're teaching is in God's word, we're to follow them as to the Lord. So all the authority is ultimately in Jesus, but is divested into other tiers that we're responsible for abiding in as well.
Exactly right. So he hand-selected representatives in whom he gave authority to go out and to declare his will to the world. And we have to respect those that he chose to go out as his representatives. And if we don't, we're disrespecting him. We're rebelling against his authority. It's kind of like if you go back in history, there are several kings, rulers, potentates, despots, that if they sent representatives to another country, another nation, and this is not terribly uncommon, but they send representatives and those representatives are humiliated or they're executed, the one who sent them then very often has a violent reaction to that you didn't respect the people I sent. He didn't go himself, but he took it personally. And then there have been wars launched off of those very things. And so we understand in the kingdom of Christ, he has those representatives that go out with his authority to declare it. And so that means we're obligated to follow it. We don't have that option, the room to say, you know what, I like what the Lord Jesus said, what we have recorded here. I like those Beatitudes. Those are really good. But I don't really particularly like what James or what Jude said or what John has written here. So we can't do that. It's all under his authority because he is the sovereign. So we need to have a proper respect for that Bible authority. Now, getting down into some more details and understanding how does that authority work? How does that authority apply? How do we discern and sort out what we do and what we don't do? Let's go back to Exodus, and this is by way of illustration, Exodus chapter 12. And I would like us to read here verses 1 through 14. Exodus 12, 1 to 14. Who wants to get that for us? Elijah?
Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the persons. According to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight. And they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it. Then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roasted in fire, its head with its legs and its entrails. You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it until morning you shall burn with fire. And thus you shall eat it, with the belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So this day shall be to you a memorial, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by everlasting ordinance.
Okay, I asked you to read those verses and note various requirements for the first Passover and give examples of what was generic versus specific in nature. So let's just kind of step through this. What do you have there in those verses that allows for general or generic authority? And by the way, before we dig into that, what is the idea or the concept of general or generic authority? Anybody want to take a stab at that?
Well, generic is, he doesn't specify, and whenever you're talking about the fire, which type of wood that you can use to heat the fire with. You know, you can use whatever kind you want, it doesn't matter.
Okay, generic authority is inclusive. Includes everything within a class of things. Whatever that category is, generic authority includes what's within there. To his point, and we'll talk more about this, maybe wood, type of wood. So specific authority. If generic's inclusive,
It would be exclusive because it, as you just said, it is specific to details. And, you know, we understand this in a lot of ways that we practice over time, Stephen, with, you know, for instance, in industry and medical, you have standard operating procedures, which are general, and then you have specific things such as work instructions and things that give you the finite details to accomplish things. And we see that because that's patterned after what God has revealed to us.
exactly. This and one of the things we want to note, and we'll dig more into this next week with the commands, examples, and inferences, this is inherent in human communication and behavior. It's inherent. It's not as though somebody just came up wholesale, hey, we're going to make up this system of how to establish what to do, what not to do, and we're just going to foist that upon the Bible. It runs through every sphere and aspect of our lives, from work to family to recreation, going out to a restaurant, which we'll talk about that if I can remember next week. But it's everywhere. And we need to appreciate that it's within the Word of God, because that's how humans function and operate and communicate with each other. God made us. He knows how we process and understand information, how we apply things, the proper way to do it, and He's revealed it to us in a way that we can decipher this, understand this. It's not a hugely complicated, mysterious type of thing within the Bible. Like, well, I can understand the instruction manual at work, but I don't know about this. I don't know about y'all, but I know things like when I was in the Air Force, you read things, sometimes it's like, I have no idea what they're saying here. Because people make things more complicated and they don't communicate as well as the Almighty has to us. Nancy.
Well, and to your point, as I was reading through this, and the fact that we all function this way to a greater or lesser degree because of our Creator, that people who don't even believe in God ascribe to God's created order. Even people in every society, tribes in Africa, they all have this because God established it when He established the order of the creation. And whether they acknowledge it or not, they subscribe to it. And I find that kind of ironic, really.
Yes.
That they would deny God, but they function as He created them to function.
Yes, exactly right. It's built in the fabric of our existence. Mike, did you have something?
I was going to say exactly the same thing. God created communication. Put it inside. We see it in Genesis chapter 2, whenever a man first speaks out about the woman. First time we see man speaking. So it was inherent inside of him, and that he could communicate in such a way that could be understood.
And even before that, to Mike's point, God communicated to man in Genesis 2:15 to 17. here's all the trees in the garden. You can eat of these trees except this tree right here. And we could have a whole study in and of itself, the authority contained within that, what's allowed, what's not allowed. But be that as it may, jumping back to Exodus 12, thinking about the things written about this first Passover, what is generic in here? What is inclusive? Just take one of these items and let's talk about it. Tom?
Kind of looked at it, start at the end, like verse 14. This day shall be for you a memorial day. Okay. Then work backwards. What day? Well, there's that day in the first month. Then there's that 10th day. So that's getting the specifics. So the general is a day will be a memorial.
Yeah, there's a day that's a memorial. That's going to be the 14th of that first month that acts as that memorial for the day. And your activities and preparations start on that 10th day. Anything you can think of that...
Along Tom's line of reasoning, when you talk about a lamb, well, then he gets specific about a lamb, doesn't he?
Right.
And he starts defining what that lamb has to have as far as qualifying characteristics.
Yes. So digging in on the specific side of things, it's a lamb and not what?
Not a calf.
Not a calf, because it says you can take it from the sheep or the goats, right? He specifically gives that, so you know it's not a calf, it's not a dog, it's not a monkey. When he gets specific about a lamb, the category, if he said take an animal, they could take any animal they wanted to, because that would be generic. But he said sheep, and he says you take a lamb either from the sheep or the goats. Well, that means you've got some leeway between sheep and goats, but it's got to be one of those. It's got to be a lamb. And what's another specific about it?
Gotta be a male.
Had to be a male. Excludes the females. Anything else?
Without blemish.
Without blemish.
I was going to say something generic, but I think it's something specific.
Yeah. Well, generic. Let's cover one of those.
The type of belt. It says a belt. This is the color, or even the sandals, or the staff, the size or type of staff.
Okay. So, type of staff. What kind of staff would be allowed? It says take a staff, huh?
Any kind, wooden or herding staff or walking staff or any kind of staff.
Staff. Okay. What are staffs generally made of? And you think they'd be made of here today? I know people maybe have like an aluminum walking stick or whatnot, but
They're wooden.
what about wooden? What would they?
Any kind of wood.
What kind of wood would you choose to make one out of?
Acacia.
Acacia? Okay. Because they have an abundance of acacia wood over there. Yeah. Hickory's pretty good, right? Hickory's pretty good hardwood. Lots of tool handles are made out of that, but you could have a hickory staff. It could be 4 feet long, it could be 8 feet long. It doesn't specify that. You could have it sanded or rough cut. You could have it stained or painted or carved, something on there. It doesn't say, it just says have a staff, have a belt, leather belt, twine belt, whatever kind of belt you want, but staff and belt. So it's generic. It's just whatever you want within that. It's okay. It's good.
Whenever he says speak to all the congregation, I don't know if that means it once. Does he call them by tribes? Does he call them, does he go house to house? He has to speak to all the congregation of Israel. However that is, make sure it's communicated this way.
Yeah, it needs to be communicated out. And generally speaking, the way we see that unfolding is he does communicate to the heads communicate, or in this case, probably, at Exodus 12, I want to back up on that. Exodus 12, tribe of Levi is not established as the priesthood yet, but he's communicating somehow to all these people. Because remember, it's 1.5 million to 2 million people that have to get this message and implement this in order to avoid this 10th plague, the judgment.
Stephen, as you were talking about the lamb, another qualification was a year old. So would it be correct that it would be greater than a year, but less than 2 years?
Yes.
Into that category?
Yeah, in the first year, or I think how that wording goes, and it's the idea of that 1 year time frame age wise. Couldn't be 5 years old. You know, I got this one. It's a big one. It's my healthiest. It's the one I really like. It's my breeding sheep or goat. And this is the best I have. That's not what he said. He said of the first year. Bruce?
Verse 4, and if the household is too small for the lamb, just the definition of too small. That's, you know, what is that number? Is it 10? Is it 5? Is it 15?
Right, yeah. That's not given to us. And they had to make that determination themselves. You know, me and my neighbor need to share one because maybe it's just a man and his wife. And the neighbors next door, just a man and his wife. And so they need to split a lamb.
It says eat it that night.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what hour.
Well, and it says sacrifice it at twilight. So that's a specific. But taking it on the 10th day, he doesn't tell them do it at dawn, do it at noon. Just take it the 10th day and you keep it. Whether you keep it on a rope, you keep it in a pen. Is it kind of a cute little thing? You keep it in the house, which would be hard because you know in 4 days you're going to, you know, kids may be upset. Tom?
It's specifically spelled out how you roast it. Don't boil it. Don't eat it raw.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So when we dig through this, we can see there's things that are inclusive and you have options and choices within that. But there are some things that are very specific and you can't go against that. If you're going to, and you think about, let me ask you this. Do you think these people had any problem applying this? Do you think anybody said, Moses, I don't like the idea of taking this little baby lamb. It's only a year old and we really like it. And this is the one we have. And I don't want to do that. It's the one without blemish. I had great hopes for this, to have more sheep, to have more goats. And I just don't like that. So I'm going to use this 3-year-old. Do you think any Israelite pushed back against the specifics? Because some of these are very specific. Well, my wife doesn't like it roasted. She likes it boiled. We want to boil it. Do you think any of them did that?
I don't think so.
Stephen, I believe we understand that they did practice it according to the letter of the law, because later on they perverted it. So,
Yes. That's one of those things. Yes, that you see later. That especially in the minor prophets, you know, you bring me the lame and the blind. What are you doing? I said without blemish. But here's the thing. What were the stakes?
Your firstborn.
Your firstborn. There's nobody among them saying, well, I'm just not sure I really understand you. I don't want to take it the 10th month and keep it for 4 days. That's going to be a hassle. So I'm going to wait till the 13th to get. They're not doing that because it's the firstborn on the line. Now, you fast forward to the New Testament, what's on the line?
our souls.
Our souls. It's high stakes. We shouldn't have this attitude, people in general. I know we don't. But people in general shouldn't have the attitude, well, I really don't like it's so specific and it tells me to do this. You know, believe and be baptized. Well, I don't like the I like the believe part. I don't want the baptized part. So I don't really understand that. Now, if you understand the stakes and you're just honest, you'll accept what it says and abide within that. Mike?
Well, they had evidence to believe that this was going to happen. They had 9 plagues previous. This was going to be the last one. And so they understood, I need to listen up to what I'm being told to do. There were other times that they were told to do things in the other plagues. When they listened, they got the blessing of it. And, the same thing today. There's more than enough evidence. What we read in scriptures is God's word. And yet people still,
Well, yeah, they didn't have even the Old Testament. Remember, Moses is writing Exodus well after this unfolded. And they didn't have, we have all of it, all that evidence laid out. So to your point, yes, we have all we need to know that it is the Word of God. It is true. Well, let's skip forward to, well, we've kind of covered questions 3 and 4. So let's just jump to question number 5. Let's go and make this. And for some of us, this is review. For some of us, this is very simple, but I want to lay all the foundation, go back through it, because as we go forward in this series of studies, we'll keep referring back to these things. So let's read Matthew 26, verses, let's just do 26 to 29, because verse 17 simply sets the stage for the event here, where the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, saying, in understanding the background of that in the Old Testament, they were commanded to remove all leaven from their homes. So this is unleavened bread, which, of course, this is the Passover that we just read about in Exodus 12, that everlasting ordinance for the Jews. This is what they're practicing here. So there's no leaven in there. They've offered a sacrifice. They're going to eat of it that night. This is what's going on here. And so Matthew 26, 26 to 29. Who's got that? Ron, go ahead.
And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup and gave thanks, and gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom."
All right. And who can quote Acts 2:42 for us? Acts 2:42. Somebody read that for us, please.
They were continuing to devote themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, the breaking of bread and bread.
All right. The breaking of bread. Acts 20 and verse 7. Mike, you want to grab that one as well?
On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together, break bread, talking and speaking, and continuing to leave the next day and prolong the message until midnight.
Okay, so having read those, question number 5, I ask you to answer these following things. What variations might be used or practiced in partaking the Lord's Supper without violating the pattern revealed, and why? So, first of all, what's that pattern? What did the Lord establish in Matthew 26? Eat what?
Unleavened bread.
This bread, this unleavened bread. And drink what? The cup, which he describes in Matthew 26, 29 as what?
Fruit of the vine.
Fruit of the vine, which, from what we understand, what we know, what did that specifically mean that they had there at the table in the Passover?
In each of the 4 Gospels, it says fruit of the vine.
What?
Every single one of those writers had used the word wine previous, so we know that they knew and understood what wine was, but they didn't use that word. They used the word for grape juice.
Okay. We don't say, generally speaking, when we're just in our everyday life, we don't say, well, I'm going to go drink a glass of the fruit of the vine. Right? We say, I want some grape juice. You might give your children fruit of the vine, but it's grape juice. Right? But that's to Mike's point. They're very intentional on here's what that was. Jim?
These people wouldn't have had any leaven in their house.
Exactly. 0 leaven, which means 0 fermentation in the house, and to observe this. So, again, that first part of question number 5, what variations might be used, practicing and participating without violating the pattern, and why? So, how do you partake of this? What's allowed? Because he says, take it. Take, eat. What are variations in take, eat? This is my body. What are options that we have?
Well, you can take a single piece of bread, break it, and serve it, or you can use multiple small pieces and have it individually broken and taken as people take it.
Are you still partaking of unleavened bread?
Yes.
Whether it's one piece, you break into small ones, or I guess in theory, sorry to gross you out, could be one piece you pass around, everybody takes a bite.
Right.
Right? It could be. Just like on the cup side, there are those who believe we just have to have one cup, everybody drink out of the same cup. I guess we could eat off the same big piece of bread. No, thank you. Any other variations?
Well, some people have a container with it all, and then they'll disperse it at the time they go to serve it so that it's in one cup, but they serve it in many cups.
Right, right. And how do we serve it? The fruit of the vine. Multiple cups. What kind of cups?
Plastic.
Plastic. Anybody remember it used to universally be the little glass ones?
Yes.
And somebody finally said, let's quit messing with all that and cleaning it every time. Let's buy plastic ones and use those. But, you can have metal trays. You could have woven basket type things to serve it in. It could be wood. I've seen wooden ones. In the Philippines, very often, what brethren have come up with over here is they take just like a piece of panel wood and they drill holes in there for the cups, and it's just a flat piece of wood because it's easy to ship over there and it's easy for them to get and use instead of the big, we have relatively big serving trays with the fruit of the vine. But that's irrelevant. And why is it irrelevant whether it's plastic cups, glass cups, metal cups, 50 cups, 1 cup is true. It's irrelevant. It could be 1 cup. Why is that irrelevant? Mike?
Because it all does the same thing, and that is you are partaking of that.
He doesn't say, hey, you need to use glass cups. You need to use 73 of them. And this is how, here's the material you use. It's not given. The command is drink. The command is eat. You drink, you eat. You've done it.
Does it say you drink 10 ounces? Or not even an ounce. It says drink.
Exactly. It says drink of it. Partake of it. And so there are a lot of variations within that can be done. So that's Matthew 26. Well, what does Acts 2:42 spell out for us, as well as Acts 20 verse 7? Acts 20 verse 7 says what's going on that occasion. And Acts 2:42 is the same thing. It's in there, and we can dig through it if we need to, but I just want to make a particular point.
They gathered together.
They gathered together. This was in an assembly of Christians where they're partaking of it. Now, the question is, when in that assembly did they take it?
First day of the week.
In the assembly. When in the assembly? So, when could we partake of it in the assembly? Could be the first thing we do, could be the last thing we do, could be something we do in between. I've been where we were in Kentucky, it was the very first thing that was done. I take that back. There was a song, a Lord's Supper song, and then the Lord's Supper was served. First thing every Sunday morning. And then there was the giving, and then there were some songs and a prayer and the preaching and so on. I've seen it where they serve it after the sermon, toward the end of service, after the invitation. They observe the Lord's Supper. And it doesn't matter because it's being observed. Mike?
Well, just being inside the building does not necessitate that we can take off. We can't right now. We have classes that's going on, so we're not gathered together the way that they were gathered together.
It's in that worship assembly where it's taking place. And on the first day of the week, Micah, what variation is in there?
Don't take it on the third day of the week.
Okay, that is a violation, right? So the third day of the week, second day of the week, fifth day of the week, all those are wrong because it does specify first day of the week, but first day of the week is general in what sense?
From midnight to midnight.
Could do it at 2 a.m. if we needed to meet. I know history tells us that churches where there were slaves in ancient times, they would very often meet before sunrise because their masters expected them in the fields or in the household, whatever, working after sunrise. So they would meet before that, or they would meet after sundown because that's when they could meet. And it doesn't matter. You know, we've all been places where the worship assembly time is a different time. It's okay. So it doesn't matter. That's general. But first day of the week is specific. Fruit of the vine is specific. Unleavened bread is specific. How it's served is open. You know, do you have 4 men up here? Do you have 2 men up here? Do you have 8? There's been places I know where 8 or maybe 10 or more, depending on about how big the congregation is. I went to preach in Australia, and there was a congregation over there that, I forget, it was about 10 or 12 people, but they came up front. Everybody got up. It wigged me out that everybody got up front, and one of the men led a prayer, and they just passed it around in that circle to each other and partook of it. It made me uncomfortable, but okay, they're getting it served, they're partaking of it. Okay. Just different ways of doing those things. So we understand that generic and specific, and violations of that. The second part of that is we've got Micah's day of the week violation. What other violations are in there? What can we not do?
If we change the order.
Okay? Because consistently, unleavened bread, fruit of the vine.
Right.
That's what we're referring to. Yeah.
There's an order to it.
Yes. And I have to admit, when I first became a Christian overseas, me and another guy were at the table, and we started to serve the cup first. And thankfully somebody popped up and said, "Hey, wait a second. You guys need to do the bread." Whew. Embarrassing, but glad he did that. Any other violations?
Well, in the Old Testament, they were told to, when they ate the bread, they was to remember their affliction, how they were. Well, when we take up now, we're remembering Christ's affliction. So what we think about when we're partaking, we give praise and thanksgiving, and then we eat. And when we're eating it, we're thinking about Christ's affliction on the cross, his suffering. If we do anything else, we're in violation. Same thing as we take the cup. We think about that, we give praise and thanksgiving, and then we drink the blood, the fruit of the vine, which represents his shed blood, and we think about that as we're partaking. Anything else is a violation.
Okay, very good point. We've been focused on the physical, material elements and actions, but there is that side of it that's the spiritual side, the soul, the engagement of the mind in what it is we are doing. And it's very specific. This is a memorial for the sacrifice of Christ. That's where our minds need to be. That's where the thoughts need to be. That's where the comments at the table need to be. Not all over the place, but we're thinking about the Lord and what he did for us. And so that is a specific. Mike?
Kind of in the same vein of that, but in Acts 20, verse 7, it says that they came together to break bread.
Mm-hmm.
So either A, they came together to have breakfast, to have lunch, to have supper, or for another purpose, and that was what we're talking about right now. That is the memorial of the Lord.
Yeah, in Acts 27, you see that's a worship assembly because Paul waited. He didn't wait 7 days, which means he was waiting Monday to Sunday. But he didn't wait those days to have a meal. He waited those days to be in the assembly of the saints. And then later it also delineates that they gave food to the man who had fallen down, they ate, and all of that. Ron?
I was going to say also, Stephen, that we recognize that there are those, and I've heard this in lessons about general and specific authority, that we look at additions and innovations. And in the Lord's Supper, people are becoming innovative about love feasts and other things, and they're doing exactly what we're told not to do in regards to it. And along the lines of what John is saying, it's, it is something that we are to have our minds committed to and follow it according to the pattern, specifically.
Exactly. And there's a whole nother aspect of that we could dive into, but there are brethren, specifically those among house churches, and then there are others who want to turn this into a common meal, doing exactly what the Corinthians did. Now they're trying to put it under the guise of this is more genuine, this is like when it was established. And that's not what it is at all. But they're twisting it, they're turning it. Mormons, does anybody know what Mormons use in the Lord's Supper? It's regular loaf bread and water. That's what they have. Yes, Nancy, that is what they have. Okay, so if you had coffee and donuts, no. Would it draw more people in? Yeah, because people are shallow and ignorant, but that's not what we're supposed to do. Any other thoughts? Mike, do you have something? John, Zach?
What about white grape juice?
It's grape juice.
Okay.
I'm not going to argue that. Yeah. Okay. What about homemade unleavened bread versus store-bought unleavened bread versus the soft kind versus the hard kind? Unleavened bread. Now, I'll tell you this. There are brethren that I think maybe, while trying to be conscientious, maybe are overly conscientious about some things. Because I've known of some, they're very concerned about things within the grape juice and exactly how it was processed and all of that. And I don't want to say we just ignore and, one day they start producing grape juice that's actually grape drink and it's like 50% apple and grape flavoring. That's not what we're talking about. But grape juice, unleavened bread. Some get concerned about what's in that, and I understand that. We want to be careful. We want to stick to the pattern, not let something slip in. But sometimes I think folks maybe get a little, just like I've known some who've insisted you have to have just one piece of bread here, and somebody has to actually break it up here and then pass it. Otherwise, it's sinful. Now, if you want to argue with that, I'll sit down and we'll have a discussion. But sometimes we maybe get a little too